Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video what I'll be doing is I'll be introducing this wildflower meadow and also cutting it back and getting it ready for winter. So this area is part of my parents' garden, and the idea is this will eventually become an orchard with wildflowers underneath. But it's going to be more of a woodland garden because we're hoping to grow the trees quite close together, get the canopies to almost touch. So the trees are quite young at the moment, which means that it's more of an open meadow. We don't really have any enough shade at the moment to start shading out the grasses and start it as a proper woodland meadow. So at the moment it's a bit more like a wildflower meadow. What we have is we have a lot of spring bulbs in here. I'll show you some photos now, and so you can see what they look like in spring. And along with the spring bulbs, we also had a lot of yellow rattle. Yellow rattle is this plant down here. It's actually a parasitic plant, and what it does is it grows its roots into the roots of the grasses. It takes out the energy and nutrients from the grasses, and that way it weakens the grasses. And once the grass becomes weaker, then more plants can come in. And there was quite a good collection over here in summer actually, and there's also quite a few vetch as well. So I'll show you some photos now of how this looked in summer when we had some more of those yellow rattle growing. But once the yellow rattle's finished, generally this is just grass, nothing else comes up. As you can see, we have got a little cyclamen in there, but generally there's not a lot going on. So what I need to do now is give this a hard cut back. I need to weaken the grass as much as possible, so I need to cut it really short. Also that gives space for the spring bulbs to come up. A lot of them are things like crocuses and winter flowering irises, so they're very small plants and they won't be able to push through all that thick grass, so it needs a really good hard cut. What I will also be doing later on, maybe the second half of this video or maybe a second video, is I need to increase the tree rings. So at the moment the tree rings are all kind of grassed up, and basically I need a tree ring because the grass is very competing with the tree's roots. I need to give a bit more space of bare soil, or at least soil that's planted up with other plants than grass, to give a bit more space for the roots to do better. Now we have done that over here with this cherry tree. That was done last winter. You can see there's a bit more of a clearing here. It's starting to grass over though, so that needs a bit of work at some point. Take the grass out, get that large ring. But that's generally what all the other large trees need, is a big kind of area around the base to keep the grass away so that they don't have competition. You can see the small apple tree at the back. It's got a small one itself, so that's going to be helped slightly. So the other plants we have in here, we have some Jerusalem artichokes, which are just starting to fall back. I'll probably cut the stems down, but we won't dig up the Jerusalem artichokes until we need them, as they don't really tend to keep very well. And we also have some small fruit bushes as well, such as currants and things, because in the long term the idea is to have more of like a fruit forest, or like a food forest. So there'll be larger trees such as the apple trees. We've got a cherry tree, and we also have damson as well. They'll produce the shade, produce fruit as well. Underneath them we'll have some smaller shrubs such as blackcurrants and gooseberries, which don't mind too much shade, so they'll be okay in the shade and they'll give us a second crop. And then underneath I'll have lots of woodland plants and woodland bulbs. But for now we're at the early stages, we need to get the shade to really come from the trees, so we need to encourage the growth of the trees with tree rings, and we also need to weaken the grass. So I'll be cutting the grass short, and I'll be doing quite a lot of progress in this over the next few years. It'll probably take about 5 to 10 years to get this to its full finished state, but this is just the beginning of the road, so I'll just keep you updated with documenting it as each step goes forward, and this is probably the first stage of it really. As I say, it's been here a few years. The trees are probably planted about 3 years ago, but we're still a long way off from getting a true woodland garden. As you can see, there's plenty of grass still here. So I'm going to be cutting this with a lawnmower. I've got a very powerful electric lawnmower, which I know can handle long grass. Normally though, if you were to do this, I would recommend trimming it and then raking out the grass. I'll see how my lawnmower does today. It's very thick. This grass hasn't been cut for probably about a year, and it's well overdue another cut, so it's quite thick. Also it's wet today, which means the grass will probably start clogging up a bit more on the lawnmower, so it will be a bit tricky, but we'll see how far we get, and I'll try and do a time lapse so you can see how it progresses as I cut it. So that's the meadow now cut. It was quite difficult towards the end. The lower down material is much woodier. It's much tougher type of grass. Also there's a lot of moss and things like that starting to come through and a lot of thatch. So that's quite hard to cut through. What I'm going to do now is leave this for 2 or 3 weeks. Because the grass has been put into shock, what it will do is it will put on some quite rapid growth and it will green up quite quickly. What I want to do then is cut all that off. The grass has been storing lots of energy in its roots the last couple of months as it's been autumn time. It's got that energy stored down in the roots, and what I wanted to do is then put the energy back up into greenery. It will do that because the top's been cut so hard. So it might be a little late in the year, just depends on what weather we get. If we have a slightly warmer autumn like it looks like we're probably going to have, then this will regreen quite quick. If it's suddenly gets cold and it's like winter, it won't put any growth on until later in the year. But I wanted to put growth on because then it'll transfer the energy it's stored in its roots into shoots and leaves, which I can then cut off and remove. So I basically want to weaken the grass as much as possible so that I can give more chance for the other plants to grow. Otherwise the grass just outcompetes everything. So I'll see how it is after a couple of weeks. What I also might do is get the scarifying blade out, because this is too thick now and too coarse for my normal lawnmower blade. But the scarifying blade will then chew this up and pull out even more grass and weaken it further. So this is the next stage now on getting this into a woodland garden. So what I need to be doing now in this orchard is I need to be creating the tree rings to suppress the grass growth around the roots of the trees so that there's less competition for them. So what I'll be doing here is, there was a couple of options I had. I could have manually removed all the grass sods. The problem with that is I don't have many places to dispose of the grass sods. It's also a lot of work, which will take several hours. There's also some spring bulbs starting to come up already, so it'll be very hard not to disturb them. So that was pretty much a no-go for digging out this. So my other option was putting down landscaping fabric that would smother out the grass and then put mulch on top of the landscaping fabric to hold it down, improve its appearance. That would do a really good job of killing the grass, but the problem with that is it would be too thick for the bulbs and the bulbs would die out. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use cardboard. I'm going to cut out rings of cardboard, possibly squares, depends what's easier. Squares will definitely be easier, but rings would look nicer. And I'll be laying that on the surface of the grass. Before I put the cardboard down, what I'll be doing is I'll be putting down a layer of bloodfish and bone, just a thin scattering. That's an organic fertilizer, which has got the 3 nutrients that plants need to grow. The reason I'm doing that is it will give a boost to the grass, so the grass will try and grow even faster because of that. That'll make the grass die a bit faster because it will put lots of energy into new growth, but then that new growth will be smothered by the cardboard and so it will die off. Basically it makes it deplete the energy from its roots that little bit faster. But also there's going to be a lot of thatch and moss and other materials, and what I want to do is I want this all to rot down and just rot down to the ground like a compost. And so adding bloodfish and bone, what that will do is it'll add nitrogen to the soil and also feed the microorganisms, and it's a nitrogen that the microorganisms need to break down a lot of the carbon material. So that will help this to break down a lot faster, having a thin layer of bloodfish and bone on there. Also, if it does start composting quite quickly, it might produce a little bit of heat, and with the mulch on top insulating it, that will further encourage the grass to grow, and so it should die a bit faster. If I was to do this in spring or summer, the grass would die within probably a month. But because it's over winter, the grass will be mostly dormant, there'll be very little growth. It'll probably take the whole winter for the grass to die. But by spring, if I was to lift up the cardboard, the grass should be completely gone. And one of the good things with the cardboard is it will soften over time, and the bulbs, from the spring bulbs that are planted in here, they shouldn't have a big problem growing through, because most spring bulbs are adapted to woodland conditions, so they're used to having a thick layer of mulch on top of them, or matted leaf mould, so they're used to growing through something that's quite restrictive and quite thick. So they shouldn't have a problem going through the cardboard. Also, they've got plenty of energy stored in their bulbs, so they can easily push through and pierce through the cardboard, whereas grass is normally suited to growing in open areas with plenty of sunshine, and they don't store a huge amount of energy in their roots. So if they're depleted of sunlight for more than a month or two, they normally completely die off, and they don't have the same kind of energy to push through. Now I do have to watch out if there's any other perennial weeds in here. I think I'm pretty much safe. It's mainly, to be honest, just grass in here. There's 1 or 2 buttercups possibly, but there's no other perennial weeds that are too strong that should be able to push through. If there was large dock plants in here, or maybe some large dandelions, then there would be a risk because they store a lot of energy in their roots that they could push through the cardboard, but they should be fine here. So the cardboard mulch, it should last a couple of years. It depends on how thickly I put it down. I'll probably put down a thin sheet to make sure the bulbs can get through. So it should last the first summer. And once the grass has been killed off, We'll just have to watch that there isn't too much starting to creep in from the edges, but as long as we keep it mulched every year, it should keep the grass away. And even if there is any grass that grows in it, because the mulch is so loose, it should be nice and easy to weed it out. So I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going to put down a thin layer of bloodfish and bone around the trees, then a layer of cardboard just to smother the grass to stop it growing through, and then I'll put some mulch on top of that just to add an extra layer so the cardboard doesn't blow away. Also, it makes it look nicer, and the mulch will slowly rot down and improve the soil over time. So that's the tree rings now all mulched and laid out with cardboard. I've also done the currant bush in the corner there. We will probably be adding one more tree this winter. This will probably go around about this area, be another apple tree, but it'll be a lot smaller, so I need to actually cut up the turf for that. But that's about it for the mulch. Now, we didn't have much mulch left, so it's a real dregs at the bottom of the mulch containers, so it's a real mixture of different mulch. Some of it is wood chips, some of it is chipped up branches, and other bits were just kind of like old runner beans and hedge clippings. So it's a real mixture, which is why the different colours. As you can see, the wood chips are slightly lighter, the other ones with more leaf matter was more composted and a little bit darker. So what I need to do now in this area is wait for the grass to grow a bit, cut it again to weaken it. Hopefully not too much of the bloodfish and bone that I put underneath the tree rings has spread out into the grassy area, because that will actually make the grass grow stronger, and we want to weaken the grass to get more wildflowers in here. But as I said before, eventually we'll get this more shaded, and then we'll get some shade tolerant plants in here, and the shade will eventually kill out the grass instead of having to hit it back every year with the lawnmower. So I think the next update video I'll be doing on this will either be planting the new tree, or it will be putting in some of the hostas. We've got some large hosta plants in the garden. They need splitting up. This will be a good place to put them if any of these areas are shady enough for them. So that's all for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next update.